Good to see you, everyone. Before we start, please allow me to remind all of us, this is a wonderful gathering of people from all across Europe who meet online to discuss in multiple languages about the future of Europe. For some, it's nothing new. It's now a democratic habit. For others, it's new, and we should celebrate that as well. And the meeting will be in multiple languages. So I would ask you to choose the preferred language channel by clicking on interpretation in the control panel, which is displayed as a small globe at the bottom of the screen. On mobile devices, you can find this function under the More button. I post in the chat the translation for this. I see my colleague Max has also done that. So you should find there the instruction on how to do it. The button should be in the bottom black bar you have on your screens. And so that's to activate the languages. Let's maybe wait a couple of seconds so that everybody's properly connected to the right language. To introduce myself and say that my name is Andrea Gaiba, and I am program manager here at the Transnational Democracy Program of the European University Institute. I'm now sitting in our office in sunny Florence, where some of you will remember we have hosted one of the assembly sessions at the end of February. And if you want to have a look at the photos from that session, I paste a link in the chat to the photo gallery. At the European University Institute, we coordinate a broad consortium of actors that compose the Democratic Odyssey initiative. This consortium has mobilized in many and incredible ways to facilitate this quite long process with the aim of demonstrating what it would look like to have a permanent traveling people's assembly for Europe. And with this wonderful consortium, we're extremely glad to coordinate the implementation of this year's pilot assembly, which you have been a part of as assembly members or have followed as members of the broader European public. This is also an important public moment to really thank everyone then who has taken part in the assembly, worked to organize it, or indeed will join us in advocating that the recommendations are followed up on. We also want to thank the interpreters who are assisting us today with this complex task. So before we really start with this session, which is a working session, where are we? I think it's a good question to start with. During and after Florence, which happened at the end of February, and building on what was done in Athens, as you will also see in our live streamed recording of sessions, the Assembly had worked on so-called trade-offs and the draft recommendations. So I share with you the link where you can also find the recordings and the timeline, but also as I speak, perhaps I can also share the screen and show you visually our timeline. Let's see if that works. Voila, this is our timeline. And since then, the online assembly moment has further brought it together with the assembly members identifying common aspects across the many recommendations, also simplifying the language and also expanding some of the concepts behind each of these recommendations. So we now present in the chat the most important link of the day, I would dare to say, which is the draft charter of the Democratic Odyssey. We are sharing then the results of all this work. This is the same document that was shared in all the communications you will have received already. But for those who are joining us from social media, for example, or other entry points, do not worry. And this is a public event, and there's going to be time to also read it. But it's also a working session, right? And that's precisely why we want to take the time to read them as soon as possible. And we'll get to that now. I now speak really to assembly members in particular, because there are many among us, and this is the beautiful part of this process. Don't worry, this is a copy of the original document. which is perfectly safe and stored. So in this copy, we ask everyone from the public to give us feedback, also in writing, to share their thoughts on the recommendations. And perhaps for the sake of reminding us collectively, we all know the topic of this assembly, the very ambitious topic of this assembly. But I repeat it so we're all on the same page, which is we want to discuss democratic actions in times of crisis. How can we steer the ship and become effective change makers? At the bottom of the document we have shared, you can find references to the previous draft recommendations. So you can also track what these new formulations have built on from the Florence work and the online assembly work. Within this process, the general public has met with assembly members already once. Some of you might remember, which was last November. In that event, both the public and assembly members have received a preliminary input from analysts. One of them is with us again today. Now we repeat that. We do that again, but with clearer recommendations in our hands and also on our desktops. It's important to open up to the public opinion for a variety of reasons, but not least to suggest what institutions should be doing should a permanent People's Assembly be institutionalized. So connecting with public opinion is important to ensure that the final result of the assembly can be agreed upon by the public and give also a stronger legitimacy to what the recommendations are asking for. So the question then becomes, how do we set up this beautiful and delicate interaction between the assembly and the public, which is what we're doing here today? There are rules to the game, disclaimer. So everybody in this call will have received the recommendations. They're also in the chat. And I want to say, however, these will not be formally presented here. You will find them in the document. The reason for not presenting it are two main ones. The first reason for not presenting them is that we strongly believe that the organizing team should not be presenting them, because the risk is that we would be misinterpreting or mischaracterizing what was produced by the assembly. So this is the work of many months, which was carried out by the protagonists of the story, which is the people from across Europe who have joined the assembly. The other reason for not presenting them is that we currently have ambassadors from one city to the next, but we do not yet have a mandated body of volunteers from the assembly who will be continue the drafting of this charter all the way through to Vienna. That will happen today. We will gather interest from assembly members to continue drafting these recommendations. So therefore, what we start with is with the feedback by the analysts, so that also everybody here, including people who are following the Democratic Odyssey but are not selected as assembly members, can warm up on how we could be discussing the feedback to these recommendations. So practically, what does this mean? That all participants are encouraged to share their views, but also to reply to some of the points that an analyst will raise, right? Of course, we will not be able to reply to all of them, but we will try. So please put your hand up as soon as you would like, because it's an interactive session. At the end of this public moment, at 7, Central European Summer Time, assembly members will transfer to a separate link. They were shared in advance so that we can move on to the next moment. This is where assembly members will reflect on the feedback received and integrate as much as possible. So we ask assembly members to take notes also of what they think is relevant in the feedback that is shared, so that in the following 50 minutes, we will be able to reflect on this debate and this discussion we're having now and initiate the work of revising the recommendations in the coming days. And we will also repeat this at the end, but assembly members are called to form a drafting committee, as I was saying. And I will paste the link in the chat as to whom you should write to volunteer. So now we start, but we start by actually having a silent moment, and we will take 10 minutes. So that's until 6:22 to look at these recommendations that were pasted and shared in the chat. And then we come back for feedback. Have a good read. Okay, we are back, I would say, from reading time, and let me know if you can hear me. We gradually switch back our cameras. I hope you had a good reading session of the recommendations as they are in their draft form. And it's now time to also introduce, well, first of all, let me introduce Calypso Nicolaidis, who's the director here at the of the Transnational Democracy Program here at the European University Institute, and will chair this session. We have a great range of analysts and also political representatives, institutional representatives. We would start with MEP, the member of the European Parliament, Brando Benifei, who's with the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, where he's also a member of the Committee on Constitutional Affairs and has been very involved with the Conference on the Future of Europe. So he also has a very distinct memory of previous transnational assemblies, albeit slightly different, and we might also be here to discuss that. Brando, can you hear us? And if that's the case, I leave the floor to you.
Yes. I think you can, sorry. Yes, I will remove my camera because I have, seems a problem with the connection. Sorry. There is some instability. But thank you for the invitation to comment on this work. I have to say that it's very important that we try to have a form of follow-up also related to this work of the Conference on the Future of Europe. Clearly, we can interpret the work of the Democratic Odyssey that I've been following in time already in some years as in different ways. But for me, it can be also considered as a form of continuation of what we try to do with the Conference on the Future of Europe. I have to say that the structure of your recommendations is problem. Sorry, I think I muted myself by error. So I was saying that the recommendations are very clear in indicating pathways of action, of empowerment, and of putting participation at the core. If I might say, we see a lot of fake participation, of participation for participation's sake that actually is not moving anything, is not activating democratic processes, it's not really fostering transparency, it's a participation that is only formal. So I would say that with your recommendations, you try to get over the idea of formality of participation, and in fact to make it substantial with the use of new technologies, with the idea of the use of public money linked to participation. But also, if I may say, for me, it's especially important to look at the conclusive recommendations where you say that you need to create a permanent assembly that could be strongly connected with the EU institutions as a bridge with the broader public. I find it extremely relevant and extremely important also for the time we are living now. I think there is a lot of of difficulty today with the legitimacy of the institutions. And I do not see the contraposition of representative democracy with participatory experiments. On the contrary, I think we need more genuine and effectual participation, not only formal, to strengthen the representative mechanisms. So I don't know, maybe this can be some of my reflections. I do not want to take too much time. I know there are many others that have to speak, but I hope I gave a few ideas on the table based on what you have been writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Brando, and also for making the connection with the legacy of the Conference on the Future of Europe. I'm not sure if Alberto is already with us. If not, yeah, I see Calypso, you're shaking your head. So if not yet, I know he's traveling and really wanted to be here with us. So we'll give him the floor when he's here. But I would like to give then the floor to Alexandrina. Alexandrina is the Secretary General of the European Civic Forum, which is a European network of nearly 100 associations and NGOs, non-governmental organizations, across 29 European countries. Alexandrina, floor is yours.
Thank you. Wait, because it switches automatically to speaker. Okay. So thank you for inviting me. I want to apologize for not having been able to follow the process and the different steps, or I might have tried to follow through emails, or we've been supportive of the idea from the very beginning. And we've been also, as organized civil society, we've been participating in the Conference on the Future of Europe. So I'm very interested in these kind of processes, and there's no time to set the scene or the context, but I think they come very timely. And you rightfully said, Andrea, in the beginning that the purpose of this work is to try to give solutions to restore trust in democracy, because this is, I think, the biggest challenge that we are facing so far. The crisis of democracy, which is underlying all the other multi-crises that we are facing. So to jump directly on the recommendations that you put on the charter, there are very many that resonate. Obviously, we know from experience that citizens' recommendations resonate also very well with the reflections that we may have in more organized forums of citizens' participation that we experience through NGO work and civil society work. I will start maybe by saying that I fully share the idea that in order to rebuild trust in democracy, we need to put accountability in the center, accountability of institutions, including through transparency and access to information. But also the idea of a shared decision-making process that involves civil participation. So it's not a scoop, and Calypso knows that we've had several discussions that sometimes there's a tension between or there's a false impression of a tension between different forms of civic participation. We experienced somehow this tension around the Conference on the Future of Europe, because as organized civil society and trade unions, we were a bit frustrated that initially our participation was not foreseen, and then we managed through pressure to have us also participants in the conference. But I would just like to say that we should not lose energy among us to discuss what form of participation is best, because probably there's not even such thing, and each form of participation through direct involvement of citizens or through intermediary forms of organizations that might be reflected in trade unions or civil society, they all should play a role in the democratic game, and they are complementary. So I just wanted to stress this from the beginning. I want to express a little caution about the way that, at least I understood, you frame the arguments for civic participation and for people's participation as a shared responsibility. I would maybe rather think about legitimacy instead of responsibility, not because obviously it would not be true that we are all responsible for the societies in which we live and that we contribute to shape, but more because we see how this notion of responsibility is used and sometimes weaponized by the institutions to throw responsibility on individuals for challenges that are really systemic, like I'm thinking about environment, employment, health policies. And for these challenges, they should be primarily tackled by collective action and strong policies, and they would really require a paradigm shift. For example, from growth and profit-driven systems and economies to ones that prioritize common good and care for the living and for the planet. So I really like the fact that you put the idea of the society of care also at the center of a renewal of democracy. I've been somewhat familiar with an Italian initiative that came during the pandemic, Società della Cura, in which some of our Italian members were involved, and it really raised a lot of hope in that period. Exactly for this sense of paradigm shift that not only we all know we need, but we felt that at that moment we were ready somehow to make concrete steps towards it. So I really stand strongly behind that proposal of care for ourselves as individuals, but also for human and non-human beings that inhabit the planet and for the planet itself. A very funny question if love should be institutionalized or can be institutionalized. Well, hate and stigmatization is already institutionalized, so why not combating hate with love and putting this notion of care more into these institutional narratives? Definitely, I think we need to rebalance in the narratives, but also in the policies, the representation of interest between and the balance of power between those who stand for common good and those who lobby for private interests. And currently, we really see, unfortunately, a tension around this and a witch hunt of NGOs around this. There's no time today. I will not open the topic because it's a hot potato topic. But just to say that I think it's really urgent that citizens and civil society we really organize ourselves to reclaim our democratic legitimacy and right to have a say on the policies that affect our daily lives. So. And to alert the institutions and to be partners with the institutions to alert on the consequences of these policies, because people know best what their needs are and to what extent they are satisfied by the policies. And obviously, institutions, instead of recognizing and putting resources into building this democratic infrastructure on the ground, and more we see that they shrink the space. On the contrary, they shrink the space for civic activism, social movements, and those who organize to express criticism and dissent. So therefore, naturally, I fully support your concerns with the repression of dissent and of civic actors that show solidarity with migrants and refugees or provide humanitarian assistance. We saw we are really, with my organization, we are monitoring the state of civil liberties across Europe, and we are collecting data, and we are publishing an annual report to inform policies about these phenomena. And we see how more and more there's this tendency to delegitimize the role of civic and the added value of civic engagement and action by criminalizing actors, environmental activists, calling them eco-terrorists, those who stand in solidarity with people in Gaza or denounce the genocidal acts by the State of Israel. They are portrayed as apologetics of terrorism or anti-Semitism. And more we see these tensions in society.
Thank you, Alexandrina. And it was really difficult for me to find a moment to actually step in, because all you were saying was extremely important. And thanks for all of this feedback. We will now move to Richard Youngs, whom you might remember from the last time we met online with the public and with assembly members last November. Richard is a senior fellow in the Democracy, Conflict and Governance program at Carnegie Europe. He's also professor of international relations at the University of Warwick. And he is here with us again to let us know how also in his view things have evolved since November. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea Calypso, for inviting me again, and congratulations to you and all the assembly members. I find the Citizens Charter truly brilliant and innovative. I think it's exactly what Europe needs at this moment. The short answer to your question, Andrea, is that things have got a lot worse and more challenging since we last spoke with the group. It seems I share very much your focus on crisis. It is clear that as you as a group have moved from Athens, Vienna, Florence, the need for Europe more effectively to manage various crises it's facing has become even more pressing and urgent, as has the need to get citizens involved in the way that Europe manages those crises. I have 4 very quick and very concrete suggestions of how you might take forward this focus on crisis in a more detailed and precise sense. 4 suggestions. First of all, it is clear that over the last few months, things have got more challenging for Europe because another layer of crisis has been superimposed upon all those that the Charter and your earlier discussions touched upon, which is the impact of the second Trump administration on Europe. We all know this is not good news. We all know this imposes a lot of extra difficulties and constraints on Europe. It makes a very bumpy ride in terms of Europe's role in the world, in the broader global international system, as well as for various domestic priorities within Europe. It's more complicated to assess how the European Union should best respond to that. It seems to me that this is a crisis of a different order. It's a more systemic crisis impacting the whole nature of the European project, and that the Assembly could make a hugely valuable contribution to debates in Europe by trying to unpack actually what this means for Europe, not just in terms of some elements of more EU cooperation here and there on particular policies, but the whole way in which Europe is organized as a security project, as a political project. I think you have the breadth of vision to try and shake up our political elites to look at this problem in new ways, in novel ways, and think about reorganizing European cooperation on fundamentally different bases. So I think that could be built into the way that you address issues of crisis. Second, and related to this, the big change since we last talked is that all the focus now in EU debates is on security. Member states pumping up their defense budgets, Europe becoming or seeking to become a tougher security actor. All the narrative is about Europe looking after its own security needs, now not being able to rely on the United States to the same degree as before. Again, that's fairly obvious. It may be absolutely necessary that the European states do need to invest more in defense and prioritize hard security more than they did in the past. But the way that the EU now is building up its security capacities is being done in a way that is not very transparent, is not very participative, is not engaging citizens very much. It's being done in a very top-down way, in a way that does not involve a great degree of democratic debate. I think that could get the EU into troubles later on, further down the road. And so I think your assembly could be a vitally important vehicle for ensuring there is real political deliberation, democratic deliberation over this vitally important issue of the securitization of the whole way in which European politics is organized. So that's my second factor. Third, the part of the Charter I really like is your observation that the real challenge is to link the citizen assemblies with means of mass democratic mobilization, the challenge, Andrea, that you opened with. The difficult question is how you do that in practice. That sentiment is very easy to stipulate exactly what it means and how you can get your teeth into discussing that in a very concrete way, I think is your real challenge in the next phase ahead. My proposal would be the one way of perhaps looking at this need to link together your assembly work, deliberation with broader forms of democratic mobilization is the issue of the climate agenda and the backlash we're seeing against the climate agenda. You all know that a lot of debate in Brussels now is dominated by the so-called greenlash, the backlash against the climate agenda. And this is the sobering factor, it seems to me here. In the last 5 years, a huge number of climate assemblies have been run. And they've made a vital contribution. But at the same time, we've seen a growing momentum behind resistance to the climate change agenda. And so somehow, this huge number of climate assemblies have not managed to put the brakes on this so-called green lash. Maybe you, as an assembly, can find an innovative way of debating these climate issues in a different way that begins to engage the kind of people who are leading this backlash against the climate agenda. That's my third assessment. Sorry, Andrea, I realize I'm short of time. But my fourth very concrete suggestion is this on the AI. The AI section, I think, is really good in the Charter because it points out that the EU is doing a good job on the regulatory side, trying to introduce new laws and regulations to govern the future of AI and broader digital technology. This is the regulatory side is where the EU has a good story to tell. It's where it is toughening its action against the large technological companies and needs to do more in that. But what has suffered is more the participative side, getting citizens involved in managing the way that AI and other digital technologies are developed over the future. 5 or 10 years ago, the EU was pumping quite a lot of money into deliberative exercises related to technology, funding civic movements to use digital technology. A lot of that has gone, has disappeared in the last 3 or 4 years because of this focus on the regulatory side of the technology agenda. I think you could be well placed to rebalance this and address really concrete ways of addressing the crisis in digital technology that the Trump administration has reinforced, and to get the participative democratic element back on the table in terms of how the EU decides its digital technology future policy in the future. So Andrea, I leave it there. I've rushed through there, but I hope there are 4 very concrete suggestions of how you might develop this focus on crisis in the future.
Thank you so much, Richard, and everyone else. Incredibly useful contributions, and they speak both to what I think we can say is they speak to the ambition also of the topic that this assembly has chosen, which was also done bottom up. And that's absolutely important. It's an opening in a way we can discuss intersection of different issues, and in this case, the intersection of different crises. I would like to leave the floor to Calypso for this next part, where we'll also gather the feedback of everybody else in the audience.
Well, thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Alexandrina, Richard, and indeed, thank you so much and Brando for these comments. At this stage, what we really want to hear is from the broader public, because you've heard some preliminary reactions. I see that on our document, on the Charter itself, we also already have quite a lot of comments. And I also remind everyone that we have translations in Italian and Greek at the bottom of the document, if some of you want to go there, in addition to our interpreters. We have heard comments that are very positive, so thank you very much. And Brando, as you endorse our recommendation 10, which has really been the inspiration of Democratic Odyssey to start with. So it's the one about creating a permanent citizen assembly. But we found that the members actually discussed it again and again, and endorse it with sometimes caveats, sometimes much more detail. But we thought that, yes, that had its place in the Charter. But the other recommendations all need a lot of work. And indeed, especially in how to get there, the concrete aspect of it. So it's very good to hear concrete dimensions. And we also stress, Alexandrina, that your remark about the role of civil society in citizen assembly or the possible trade-offs is very important. And for us, it has been very important to include, it's very much the spirit of Democratic Odyssey, to include civil society as members in our deliberation. And they have added a lot of richness from their own experience and engagement themselves with publics. So at this stage, we have our draft charter. It is going to be worked and reworked by a drafting committee of the members themselves. Later, we will hear from the members who are listening with great attention to the analysts now, but also to the members of the public. So we have some time left now, about 15 minutes, to hear from members of the public. Some of you have already commented in writing on the charter, but we would love to hear you orally. And I think we need to stress that a lot of what is said in the charter that the members came up with is not necessarily straightforward. Alexandrina noted one of the quips that was by a member, can you institutionalize love? Yeah, and we put in that charter some of the questions that have been asked by the members and some of the disagreements. There was a lot of disagreements, and there was a consciousness of trade-offs. Yeah, if you have this, if you have participation, what about emergency? What about government's responsibility? And stressing that we need to ask who is responsible. So yes, let's hear some comments on and suggestions for change that might be suggested to the members who will have the ultimate authority and legitimacy to add. And you can comment on the charter itself or the kind of points that were heard now, whether it's on AI, the later recommendation, 10, AI and technology, the relation with different kinds of participation, how do we optimize this? And indeed, the question that was raised by Richard about defense, that is a very different atmospherics than how we started in Athens, an EU of defense. Democratizing, citizens will, at the end of the day, be the ones who will defend Europe if need be. So democratizing that debate is really crucial. And thank you, Richard, for raising this. Thank you, Alexandrina, also for all your additional comments that I'm sure people are reading. So you can write in the chat, as Max says, or you can raise your hand for additional comments. And the other thing is, if you want to comment on each other's comments, Brando, Alexandrina, and Richard, please also feel free. So we have Clarita. Clarita, do you want to raise your hand and you want to speak? Please go ahead. Go ahead, please, Clarita.
Well, I read your paper. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you read the charter.
I read your paper, the different points, and it is interesting that in the first points, you really only talk about political participation. And later on, you go on to participation of communities. For instance, those who have changed energy, who are working with renewable energy technologies, or those who do other things together, working. So I wonder, I know about Latin America, and somehow things can be in focus, like in your case, in the territories and on the work. Because if you only focus on participation, you somehow don't get the whole community. Do you know what I mean? No. So I propose to really get the foot on the ground by really putting emphasis on the people who are forming already in their territories movements of transformation, and who already are trying to get to know each other, because they are also in the capability to make stress on changing the type of technology, etc., what Richard was talking about. And I think they can, in their territories, build up the contact to their public policy. You see, I think you have to keep with the feet on the ground. Things are not possible if you don't build up power. And you build up power by connecting those people who are trying to, with their existence and with their communities and with their solidarity work, to change already their way of living and take into account their territories. And then you can build it up from the bottom to up. So I think this would be important.
Thank you, Clarita. And I indicate that you're referring to recommendation 5, which builds on some of our members stressing the existence of these communities, but they're not always empowered. They're not always connected. It's not clear how they connect with public authorities, but they are crucial. And you're referring to Latin America. Part of our mindset and ethics of DO will amplify this mutual learning with the rest of the world, where we really are committed not to be Eurocentric here. So it's very important to hear what you say and raise the question that was already debated by members as to the relationship between all these autonomous communities that we see arising in Europe. There's 10,000 simply on energy, but many others, housing and neighborhood. How do they relate, and how do they affect the politics of their country, of Europe? So maybe this recommendation 5 needs more commentaries from everyone and more sharpening. And how do we get there? So thank you so much, Clarita. And now we'll take another comment, which is from Negar.
Activated microphone. It's echoing here because I have two applications. I have been in contact with WIPO Global about Entry, and everything is done with so much effort during so many years without any connection to support from real government or anything. You tell it, we need a government, and we have a government in Denmark that is STM.dk. They are registering, and systematically they are educated for 3 countries all at once. But the connection between Sweden and the anywhere from the government is disrupted, because they are not, they are just hiring and the position after position. Nobody is responsible in Sweden to act and act sustainable. Is not teamwork. It is about have a brain, and they don't have it. I haven't registering so much their numbers in any municipality, the medical product agency, in TLV and everywhere. From last year to now, they have just been hiring, changing bosses in every municipality, and just watching something it is information to them. It is just information to them to act and hire each other. And my diary numbers is not read. Even this is just registrators receiving my emails, and they talk about simple things that is just two meanings like that. It is not the regulation of sustainable development established in Sweden at all. So it is what I've analyzed the society so many years. They just remove the diary numbers instead of acting and collaborating to solve any problem. From 1997 until now, they have just removed the possibilities to sustain humanity.
Negar, thank you for lending
register the products they have eliminated,
comments.
Everything that's.
Sorry, Negar. Thank you for adding emotional force to your comments and including about Sweden. Part of, I think, what our members, some of the challenge is how to express our sense of the limitations of engagement of citizens and sometimes going backwards. How do we express this in our charter, in our message to the world? Because I think we're quite polite in the charter. Our citizens have been very polite, and maybe we need to have more of that, very strong wording that you provided us. So thank you for this. And now we are going to turn to Jochen, who has
Calypso. Okay, so I just wanted to note that, I mean, we don't live in a perfect democracy. I guess we all agree with this, and also why we are here. And so what is important anyway, like in an imperfect democracy for sure, is the separation of powers. And what I really like this this charter, but I think one point I want to sensitize you guys a little bit is the separation of powers and the power of the court, like the judicial branch, because for example we have like in the harness technology, unleash collective intelligence section. I already commented a little bit. If you would give this power which you propose there who has this power to, for example, determine what is positive and negative actions? I mean, for this we already kind of have the courts, right? And it's not clear what the power here where it would go. And in this case, it might go to the wrong people. Let's say to one branch which they might get overly strong. So I just would be just as a little sensitization here for this one particular point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jochen. Part of the question is how citizens work with different parts of the institutions. And the courts are part of the story, including when we observe what is happening in the United States. But the question for citizens is, can they just, let the court decide? I mean, of course, the courts decide, but how do citizen engagement interact with judicial action? And what I think we hear you say is maybe some allusion to the relationship between the institutions in Europe should be made more explicit. And sometimes it was raised in our conversation. So thank you so much for this. I mean, before we turn to the second part of our conversation, where members of the Assembly, the members themselves will react to what they've heard, I wanted to turn back to Richard or Alexandrina. I think Brando has left us now. If you have any other last minute reaction, and of course, Alexandrina, we note all of your great comments in the chat too.
I know you're short of time, so I just make one sentence, which is say I agree very much with Kaladita's point. I think that at the moment, the disconnection between these energy technologies and communities on the ground, in very local communities, and what's going on in the EU is part of what's driving the backlash against the climate agenda, where I think you can help bring together participation and more effective climate action. But also, just to say again, congratulations on the charter. I think it's maybe it needs work at Calypso, but I think it's a really excellent platform for moving forward.
Thank you, Richard. We're taking good notes. Alexandrina, any other last word? Yeah.
Yeah, no, just to say good luck in finalizing and putting it on track mostly. and probably Advocacy Road will start with institutions trying to institutionalize now a citizens' assembly, because I understand this is the ultimate goal, to get institutional backup for the idea, and not only backup, but also, I suppose, funding and infrastructure for it. So good luck.
Indeed, absolutely. And as we are now closing the session with our public engagement, it is worth repeating that this charter is work in progress, that feedback, we will continue to want to hear and read your feedback on our digital platform. And that indeed, at the end of the day, this process is, of course, bottom up. This is work of civil society, as was outlined, but also ultimately and hopefully the institutions of the EU and of its member states can endorse this project. The more citizens support it, the more we are likely to see this endorsement. So I'm going to pass the floor back to Andrea to take us to the next stage. And again, very much thanking our analysts for your reaction, both positive but also constructive criticism as to what needs to be clarified and added. So thank you again. Andrea.
Indeed, thanks everyone. And this concludes this public part. Now, the next hour we will spend into reflecting on all that was discussed and said, which is quite a lot, on all the recommendations. We'll not, again, as I was saying, cover all of them, but we will get a head start. And this session is recorded, so we can always go back to it and rewatch it in different ways. So what we will be doing now is we will switch our camera off, and we will share the link to the next session for assembly members only, so that you also have it here. Of course, we will check once you enter the next link if you are an assembly member. So only join if you are, and we will see those among you who are on the other side. You should have already received the connection details via email, also for the second session. If you are struggling to find it, please do write to us also at my address, which I'm posting in the chat, or indeed Teona's address, which I have shared before, and we will share the link with you. And without further ado, we will see you on the other side for assembly members. But first, thanks everyone from the public who has joined this meeting. And please continue to follow the process and the recommendations also on our digital platform, where they will be ultimately posted, and there will be space for you to continue commenting on them, even as they are ready. Also to monitor whether if institutions and other actors are following up to them. Thank you, everyone, and see you soon.